Stan Watkins. I live in St. Augustine, Florida. We have about 1 acre plot of land and a very nice house. We were having some problems though with water overflowing onto our pavers and into our screened-in deck. I decided to go online and look for a company that might be able to help us with that problem by sealing over the gutters that had filled up with leaves. I found LeafFilter along with 2 or 3 other companies, and I started putting out some calls. LeafFilter was actually the first one to get back to me. And I spoke to my wife and told them we'd be having an appointment the next day. Her first statement was, well, we're not doing anything right away. I want to hear from everybody before we commit. I said, fine, that sounds good to me. We looked over our budget. We looked over all the figures that would impact our making a decision and settled in and waited for the gentleman to come to the house. 2 gentlemen arrived. Both seemed very knowledgeable. They were very friendly. They came in, they sat at our dining room table with us and began to lay out all of the advantages of LeafFilter. My wife is a bit more of a skeptic than I am, but I was determined to wait and make a decision at some point in the future. But they did give us a very good plan and a very good identification of what they could do and what the LeafFilter system would accomplish for us. And the more we listened, the less our resolve to wait for another company was there. So it took about 40 minutes and they laid out everything that they could do. And then of course, our big question was, what's the cost? And they went through what their base cost was and then outlined several ways that we might be able to save on that cost if we were willing to work with them and do a few things. And one of the things that they suggested might save us some money is if we were able to have them come in the next day or so. And actually that was perfect for us because we were having quite a problem with the water coming into our property. So we agreed. And at that point, they told us what other measures they might take to save us a little money. My wife and I did ask if they would step out for a few minutes while we just talked. And as you might guess, by then, we had begun to decide maybe we would go ahead and make this decision a little quicker than we had planned. As my wife and I discussed, we didn't think we'd find a better price. And from what I had heard about the way the 2 gentlemen had laid out the system, I didn't think we were going to find a better gutter protection system. And in fact, I don't think we would have. So we asked them back in after about 5 minutes of discussion, suggested that they were still a little bit out of our range, but they said they would certainly be willing to work with us. And in fact, they did, and got the cost down to where we thought was very reasonable. And so we agreed. We signed all the paperwork. Gentlemen excused themselves. They left for the day and said that someone would be there the next day. Somewhat skeptical about that because we'd heard promises about other services, people coming the next day, and then got some calls saying, well, we can't make it today. Could it be later in the week? But in fact, another technician showed up that day. One man, I thought it might be a team, but there was one man came, asked a few questions about the problems we were having, set up his equipment, began to work on our gutters and worked through the day and into the evening, stayed until everything was done, finished up about 7 o'clock in the evening and cleaned up everything, left the yard. I wouldn't have been able to tell anyone had been there. And now, shortly after that, we had Hurricane Ian and we had quite a bit of rain. And I went out and looked at that gutter system and it was funneling everything, all the water appropriately and through the gutters and out the downspouts. And we had a lot of high winds and a lot of pine leaves came down and pine needles. And I went up to check and I saw all those needles had been collected on top of, not in our gutters, which continued to allow the water to flow through. Now, today we're expecting another hurricane, and I expect the same results. I'm not at all worried about any water overflowing into or on our deck or around the house.